All right, thank you. I'll just get started real quick, just a quick introduction. First of all, I want to thank everyone for volunteering your time to be on the steering committee. You'll be part of a process that can really help shape the city for the future, and we're looking forward to hearing your insights based on your backgrounds and experiences. The steering committee is 11 members, and some of you are on council, planning commission, BZA. Some of you are architects and business owners, and we have others who are on Commission on Inclusion, Parks Board, Urban Forestry. So we got a really great group, and I look forward to working with you all. As a quick background on how we got here, the city has had some form of zoning code since at least the 50s, and since then it's been piecemeal together through ad hoc amendments and revisions, and it's been added here and there. There's been some major updates from what I can tell, at least in 1979, 1993, and the most recent one in 2007. But even those major updates were not a complete rewrite of the code. They're just more revisions and reorganizing the code. So that goes to show we have language that's still in our code that we've had since 1979. So we're looking at a complete rewrite here, and based on those all those revisions and amendments, it's led to several issues. Some of those being that it's difficult to navigate and find code sections. Sections of the code are outdated; they're not relevant anymore. Oh, you're good. The code is inconsistent in places and conflicting with other code requirements. It's challenging to interpret and enforce. There's a lot of missing definitions for uses. Discourages diversity of housing options. Commercial code can be restraining in certain sections, and the procedures can be time consuming. So these were further supported by a diagnostic report that we had completed in 2022. So based on all that, again, we're looking at a complete rewrite here to amend the entire code. And the goals are to create a user-friendly, development-friendly, sustainable, and innovative code that can benefit everyone. So we've contracted the services of House of Levine. They are a planning firm based in Chicago, and zoning is their bread and butter. They've worked with over 400 communities across the country. And with that, I'll turn it over to them. I'm here with Ruben Schell and Jackie Berg of House of Levine. So, thanks.
Thank you. Um, Thank you all so much for having us here this evening. We are so excited to be kicking off this project. Before we get into things, I'll do a quick round of introductions. My name is Jackie Berg. I'm the zoning practice lead at House of Levine, so I oversee or manage all of the zoning work that we do across the country. John Houseel, one of the partners of the firm, will also be involved in this project. He is in the field at another project right now, but wishes he could be here, but he'll certainly be involved throughout the process as well. And then Ruben Schell here is the project manager, so he is going to be the person you see most often. He'll be really the point person, point of contact for the project moving forward. And then we do have several planners back in the office who are going to be providing support along the way, lots of research and writing and development of diagrams and GIS analysis and all that good stuff. But really, it's just Ruben that you need to know. I'm just here to smile and wave. A little bit about our firm. So like Zach had mentioned, we are a planning, zoning, and design consulting firm. We're based out of Chicago, but we do work all across the country. So we've done more than 450 planning studies or planning projects with more than 400 communities across the country. Ruben and I have been working together on zoning projects. With House of Levine, we're really the core team that does this type of work. I've been at the firm for about 7 years and Ruben for about 3 years, so we have a lot of zoning codes under our belt. I'm really excited to bring the national experience and the breadth of expertise that we've garnered from working on codes throughout the country here in Stow. I think it can be really helpful to have that perspective from other communities, not just those here in Ohio. This is just some of our zoning experience. I will not go into detail on all of it, but just wanted to let you all know that you are in good hands. We've done this many times before. and we're really looking forward to engaging you all throughout this process to make sure that the code is really what Stow needs moving forward. So for tonight's agenda, I just went through some introductions. Next, I'll get into really what the Planning and Zoning Code is all about. And then I'll turn it over to Ruben, and he will go through our scope of work, get into a bit more detail about your role in this project, and then really the majority of our time we want to spend having a discussion with you all about what's working and what isn't with the codes today. All right, so what is the city's zoning and development code? So it's located in part 11 of the city's code of ordinances and really regulates all development activity in Stow. So first and foremost, it breaks the city into districts where certain land uses and development types are allowed or not allowed. It also establishes requirements that development has to follow. This can be dependent based on use or dependent based on location. But it looks at things like landscaping and parking and signage and building design. So it could, be from the building materials that you use on the exterior to roof finishes, windows, all of those other types of building design components. And then I think one of the most important components of the zoning and development code are the procedures for review and approval. So this is how development proposals get accepted by the city, reviewed, and then approved. So whether that is something that is done administratively by Stow's great staff, or something that is brought to a planning commission and city council for approval, certainly want to have discussions about how all of these components of the zoning code can be modernized and improved moving forward. So the 2017 comprehensive plan, you all may be wondering, I thought we already did a lot of this work and we know what our vision for the future is. Well, the comprehensive plan is not a regulatory document. It's an aspirational document that really says this is what we would like to do, this is the vision that we have for the future, but it does not require people to follow that vision. So the Planning and Zoning Code are those regulations that people must follow, things that they have to do to develop here in Stow. So we want to make sure that the relevant recommendations of the 2017 comprehensive plan are carried forward, but then understanding that it is a bit older of a plan, so 2017. Things have certainly changed since then, pre-pandemic times. So there may be some policy items that we want to rehash or rediscuss. So we will certainly be doing that as a part of this process as well, to make sure that we are all on the same page in terms of policy, so that we're actually codifying the right thing. And I think that's a lot of what you all will be looking to you all for advice on, is what is the policy of the city. We'll certainly be going to council with that as well. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Ruben, and he'll go through our scope.
Okay, thank you, steering committee, for having us here this evening. Yeah, we're all real glad to be here and looking forward to working with you all on the Planning and Zoning Code update here. So my name is Ruben Schell, planner with House Seal Levine, and as Jackie mentioned here, I'll just start out by going through the scope of work and workflow and order of steps that we'll be taking to see the project through. So just a look at some of the real goals that the city had back when it put out the RFP for the project. Some of them are up on the screen here. As Zach mentioned, designing the code to be user-friendly, creating a consistent document that's easy for staff to administer and for residents, developers, business owners to use and find information in. The city wanted to incorporate diagrams and tables and graphics that help convey the information where possible. Creating some, looking into different approaches for zoning, things like form-based regulations that might regulate the appearance of development a bit more than the use necessarily. Looking into overlay districts, and floating zones and performance standards, design guidelines, different innovative approaches to zoning, exploring throughout this process. Moving down, some more of the goals up on the screen here, looking at the city's parking regulations and refining those for modernization. Looking at the mix of uses that are allowed in the zoning districts and perhaps exploring ways to encourage a bit more of a mix of uses where it's appropriate. Looking into ways that the code could be modernized to allow a bit more in terms of housing variety and business variety, making it easier for business owners and developers to apply and to know what's allowed under the code. Incentivizing development that does comply with the regulations and streamlining the process for those types of proposals. And then ensuring compliance with federal and state law and synthesizing the city's plans and policy documents into the zoning code itself. We know that these are all goals that you all had going into the project there. So hopefully we'll get into discussing all this a little bit more later on tonight, and then those will filter on into the project as we go. So the scope of work and process that will follow is really divided into 7 different steps that we have up on the screen here. And we're really starting in step 1 tonight, so we'll take a look at these just real briefly one by one. Project initiation, this really started back in February when we started working with Zach and the city, just getting all the logistics in order for the projects. We had some kickoff calls to start out with, and we've been meeting consistently to talk about logistics for this week over the last few months. Earlier today, we met with staff and went on a tour, really getting a sense of Stow on the ground, seeing the sites and getting a sense of the city and its development on the ground. Later on tomorrow, we're meeting with department heads to get input on the project, sense of their priorities for the zoning code. That step D up on the screen is where we're at tonight. We're getting feedback from you all on priorities and getting your input on priorities for the project. From there, we'll go, as far as next steps, we'll go into some more community engagement to really get more feedback on issues and opportunities with the zoning code, priorities, things that stakeholders feel we really want to update in the zoning code. So we have an online questionnaire that'll be open later this month that will be open to members of the public. We'll gauge opinions on a variety of issues related to the zoning code. We'll be doing interviews with other stakeholders, businesses, developers, other local institutions. That'll be mainly tomorrow, getting their feedback and thoughts on priorities for the update similarly. Then tomorrow night we have a kickoff open house that'll be in person in this room, getting more input on priorities for the update. And then once we're through with this, we'll tie all of that together in a summary that some sort of encapsulates all that input. From there, once we have all the community input gathered, we'll be going into an analysis of the existing planning and zoning code, taking a look at, given all of that feedback in city's 2017 comprehensive plan, what are the major recommendations, what are the big picture items the city should think about updating in its planning and zoning code. So we'll be tying all of that together in a report and reviewing that with you all later on this year in the summer. We'll be taking a look at some best practices, both nationally and in Northeast Ohio, getting a sense of what are some of the more innovative practices that communities are employing in their zoning that the city could also think about. So we'll be tying all of that together in a report, and we'll be reviewing that with you all and staff. So this is really the next time you'll see us, and that we'll be meeting together is when we'll be reviewing this report. From there, we'll get into the work of actually drafting and updating some of the new planning and zoning code. So given all of that upfront feedback, all of the recommendations that we'll have looked at with you all, we'll get into actually drafting the planning and zoning code itself. So starting out with districts and use standards, this is the city's zoning districts and the types of uses and development standards that are allowed in those. We'll draft the zoning code in chunks and review that with first staff in a series of meetings, and then take it to you all to give you an overview, and then get your thoughts and input on these drafts along the way. So first off is the zoning districts and uses. That'll be in a series of 2 or 3 articles. From there, we will move into development, subdivision, and sign standards. This again is just another chunk of the zoning code. It'll be development standards. Things will included in there will be elements like parking, off-street parking, landscaping, buffering, screening, other things that pertain to sort of the physical development and provision of amenities on sites. Subdivision regulations, those will be regulations for the division of land and public improvements. And then sign standards will be all the regulations regarding signage on private property. So that's a big substantial chunk of the planning and zoning code that we'll be drafting there and bringing to you all for feedback in another meeting. From there, we'll get into approval procedures and the city's procedures for review and approval of different development applications here. This includes everything from planned unit development to special uses, site plan review, zoning and sign permits, and then getting more specific into definitions. We'll be drafting all of that together in a couple of articles and taking it to you all for review and input. So that's how we'll proceed through drafting the zoning code itself, is staging it out in a series of chunks so that you all don't have a giant 200-page document to review all at once. It'll be in stages and hopefully a little bit more digestible as we go there. So that'll bring us to the last step in the scope of work here. This task 7 is really where we'll have a final draft planning and zoning code for you all to take a look at. All of the articles that we mentioned and talked about previously will be available for you all to take a look at. We'll have another meeting and go over that with you all. And then it'll proceed from there into the final adoption stages. So we'll have some additional information to share with the public, brochure, another open house towards the end, and then to let residents and stakeholders know about sort of the outcomes and how they relate back to the input that we're receiving now towards the end of the process. And then it'll go through a more formal adoption hearing at the end of all that. So that is really a look at the process that we'll take to draft and rewrite the planning and zoning code over the next year and a half or so. With that, I think we'll just go over a couple notes on your role as the steering committee and the types of feedback that we'd really like to have from you all throughout the process.
Before we do that, though, any questions on the process, zoning, and planning code in general? Anything that you all are curious about before we get into our discussion?
Sounds good. Yeah, so yeah, the steering committee, this is really a group of stakeholders and individuals. You all are familiar with planning and zoning and Stow and have experience using and working with the planning and zoning code that the city has today. And so really we'll look to you all for advice on and input on planning and zoning matters that have a bit more of a policy implication. We'll look to you all to think about the trade-offs for decisions and throughout the process, and yeah, really for input on policy matters and weighing the pros and cons of different decisions throughout the process. So you all are the experts on what's right for Stow, and we'll look to you to provide input on the draft document as we go through the process, and for policy input and sort of value judgment. So yeah, really up here on the screen again, we'll look to you to provide expertise on issues and opportunities, consider the trade-offs of different decisions, and then provide recommendations to the Planning Commission and City Council on different matters related to the update here throughout the process. So with that, I think we'll get right into some discussion on issues and opportunities for the planning and zoning code, unless there's any other questions about all that upfront stuff before we get right into it. Yeah, yes, sir.
Just real fast. So, how much time? And I saw all those cities that you guys have done. I mean, you're taking information from steering committee, input from residents. How much do you get to know Stow before taking a tour of Stow? Like, is there other pieces to that this long process goes in, so you understand some of the challenges that we've had on the zoning code? And I saw from each of our perspectives, which I think is great. I appreciate that, because my perspective on Pulte homes may be different from somebody else's, right? So I understand that. But like, do we have enough information to know what we need, or do you plan on that from being feedback from residents, random people, the steering committee, meetings you may have? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's really where we're at this week, is getting familiar with Stow and hearing from you all on the key issues and opportunities, things that you really think that are priorities to address in the zoning code. We want to hear your experience working with it, and thoughts on what you think could really improve about the document as a whole. And I think, like you had mentioned, we have some the city's 2017 comprehensive plan will be a good guide. There was a lot of engagement that went into that, but we have some other engagement planned here too that I think tying all of that together can really provide some good, robust kind of feedback on where the city stands on certain issues. So I think the online questionnaire can really be a good measure to get to a lot of folks that might not be coming out to meetings we often find, and hear input on issues and opportunities and those key kind of matters related to the planning and zoning code here. Same way with the open house that we'll have tonight or tomorrow night, getting some more thoughts and feedback from members of the community, and all the stakeholder interviews that we're doing tomorrow. I think we're going to talk with around 15 individuals that have experience with the planning and zoning codes. So yeah, I think through all of that input, tying that all together, it can really provide some good background for us. And we'll be able to come back and present all of that feedback to you all.
Great,
in the
thank
next
you.
stages.
Thanks, Ruth.
Yeah. Is there anything you wanted to add?
All right, so you mentioned that you'll be having the survey go live in probably a month from now. What will be some of the themes that will be addressed in the survey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the survey, it'll be open for a couple months or a few months from here, so it'll give everyone, all the residents, a good window of time to take a look and provide answers. But it'll provide, there'll be a number of topics on there that, as we get into the discussion here, it'll be some similar themes as we go here. But definitely taking a look at residents' input on provision of housing in the community is going to be a big one. Which different types and formats are appropriate in Stow, where those really are appropriate and where they're not appropriate. We have a number of visual preference questions on the survey that ask residents which types of design and sort of building features they like best, so we can hopefully tailor the code more around some of that input. We have some questions geared towards environmental regulations and sustainability, where we can look to improve things like stormwater retention or landscaping, or maybe off-street parking, where residents think off-street parking could be provided more or maybe a little bit less in the community. And then, yeah, there's some questions about commercial businesses and which types of those are appropriate where in Stow. So it's really some broad picture questions that anyone can really answer and provide input. Yeah, you don't have to be an expert on the zoning code to provide input on those questions. So, yeah.
Great, thank you.
I'll also add that the open house that is being hosted tomorrow evening, it's an interactive open house where folks will be sharing their thoughts on this very similar questions that we have in the online questionnaire. We have found that the folks that come to the in-person open house are very rarely the same people that take the online questionnaire. So really want to make sure that we're getting feedback that we're able to compare and contrast across our virtual and our in-person outreach approaches.
And a quick question too. I just kind of see the list of input. How do we get the responders involved? Is that a whole separate thing to make sure that we're compliant with fire and EMS and police, that they have that input? And I just didn't see that in the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be talking with those individuals in a department heads meeting. I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but we have that tomorrow. And that'll be an in-person meeting here in City Hall. We'll have fire and EMS and the building official and the law department here, hearing from them all on their thoughts and input there. Yeah.
And also throughout the scope of work where we have our staff review sessions, that's certainly when Zach and his team will bring any relevant information to the attorney or to fire or police or whoever they may need to get some additional input on. So hopefully that'll really be baked in throughout the process.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be getting more input from different departments as the code's adopted or drafted over time.
Well, we're good. So I've got notification of the open house tomorrow through Facebook and other things with, emails from the city of Stow. So I'm on a planning commission. How are you rolling out to the people that don't attend the session tomorrow, the open house? And is it going to be a very formalized, there's a notice to go online to do something, or is it going to be electronic, or how are we getting the whole city input involved in that?
I can take that one. Most of the advertising will be over social media and our website. That's the most effective way to get information out. And also, as you probably know, if the mayor posts something online, he's going to have 1,000 people click on it and follow it. Yeah, we have, like for the open house, we had several social media posts scheduled before the meeting just so that people are aware of it, to get the word out. It's been on our website. It's been on the project website as well. So we're getting out there as much as we can. I think we posted at the library as well. So after that, after the open house, to get the survey out, we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to post it online to make people aware that it's out there and available.
And one thing that we will rely on you all for is to help spread the word about the project. So you all have your own networks. So when the social media posts for the online questionnaire go out, if you all could reshare those, make sure that they get around to people in your networks that you're aware of, that would be super helpful, just to make sure we really are covering all of our bases.
All right, yeah. If there aren't any other questions on the scope of work or process for the project here overall, we'll get into discussion on issues and opportunities. So, yeah, really what we had in mind is just some open-ended sort of group discussion from you all. We want to hear from you as the experts on Stow. You've all seen and interacted with the code and had some interaction with development in Stow in some way. So yeah, we really want to structure this as kind of an open-ended discussion on priorities for the update here. So we have some discussion questions here up on the screen, and certainly don't have to stick to these. If there's other areas that come to mind and you want to bring up, definitely feel free and bring it up at any time. But wanted to start here with housing. We know this is an important issue in Stow, in Northeast Ohio here, and really across the country. As Zach mentioned, we know the city's zoning code now can be sort of restrictive on which types of housing formats are allowed and where they can be built in-house. So want to get your thoughts on ways the city could think about diversifying how housing can be constructed here, and whether any of the formats up on the screen could be appropriate ways to provide new housing options for residents in Stow.
Just a quick background. I mean, so right now in our code, single-family detached housing, those are the only permitted by right uses in the residential districts. Everything else on that list is either not permitted or conditionally permitted, meaning it has to go through planning commission and council for approval. We have also minimum dwelling area size, which would probably prohibit tiny homes and accessory dwelling units. We don't have any applicable code that would apply to an accessory dwelling unit, which would be kind of like a granny in-law suite, something that you can put in your backyard for your in-laws to live in. We don't have any type of code to address those either. And I think that's something that's becoming common in zoning codes, is to allow those types of housing around the cities as they're becoming more popular. So I know certainly that's on my wish list of code changes, but we're also looking at potentially higher density development that could be allowed around the city.
I assume it's probably in the 2017 assessment that was done, but what percent of the residential properties in Stow, or residential area in Stow, is still developable, if you will, and how much is already occupied with some of those? Is there any percent right now that we're looking at the growing?
We would probably have to dig into our GIS data to pull that information. I mean, right now, a lot of the city is built out. There's not many available lots for residential, and there's some single-family lots kind of here and there throughout the city. We have a decent amount of commercial and industrial land that can still be developed. As far as housing, most of this would be for the repurposing of housing or of residential properties. So there might be a group of dilapidated single-family homes that could be combined and demolished and rebuilt with something more density, perhaps, or different types of uses. But as far as the percentage of what types of housing around the city or available lots, I'll have to pull that for you. Yeah.
Thanks, Zach. I think it's an important part when you ask this question to understand our history. We were all farms years and years and years ago, right? And some of the I just spoke to two residents, got 7 acres and 4 acres, 2 farms left out there on Young. And I said, how often do you have a developer come in? Because I'm thinking of the Pulte, right? And they go at least 3 times a week, right? So, but I don't think that's what residents want. Keep cramming a different R3 or Zach, you know all this, right? And they don't really connect. And we're not sure because we use this property and then it doesn't connect to the next property. And so to me, I mean, I like the mixed use upper floor residential over ground floor commercial only because we've got to do something about strip malls where nobody goes shopping anymore, right? I mean, they still do a little, right? But not like it used to be, where people would come in and go, yeah, I'm going to, Stow Kent Shopping Center. We used to have festivals there and all kinds of stuff going on. Now, we're putting a Dick's. Planning Commission approved it, right? How we go? We built a Meyer. Okay, we got a couple new businesses on a strip mall there. But I guess my point is, without talking in circles, is we got to figure out in Stow. We tried to make a downtown between 59 and Graham, and it was an overlay district. People freaked out, right? But when you look at Kent, Hudson, Cuyahoga Falls, who are doing, we've got to do something in Stow that, and the mayor and I visited a couple weeks ago, and I think, Zach, you're aware, we've got to combine something like Plain Township did, and if anybody on the steering committee wants to look at it, Plain Township Amphitheater it's in a strip mall. But now it drew, right, a nice restaurant. We don't have any upper end restaurant, right? It drew a brewery. They don't have one, right? We don't have all these things that people want. So when I go to Hudson to eat at a nice restaurant or walk in their Dora area or do the same in Cuyahoga Falls, I run into more Stow people, right? I say, oh, hey, how you doing? I know you, So it's a little bit of a challenge because there's not a downtown, but something that will be, for lack of a better way to say it, a gathering place, whether it's you put an amphitheater in a strip mall area and we have a Dora and we extend the sidewalks and we draw somehow a unique something where Stowe can say that's ours, where it's been difficult to convince people of a downtown, right? So I know that's a weird comment, but that's really, I think, the essence of, along with all the other pieces you're talking about, which I totally agree with. But I guess understanding our history and knowing where we've been and where we want to go, right? I think, and putting that together in the code, I think will help us. So I don't think there was a question in there. I think it was a comment. But like, if you could, I mean, we've got Norton Road Plaza. We've got Stowe Camp Plaza. Okay, we put a Dixon there, we put a Meyer in there. There's a bunch of space. No mixed use, right? I'm always complaining about sidewalks. More money on sidewalks. Hudson's spending $4 million. They're going to be able to get to everything. Sidewalks, which is going to help their area where people are gathering, right? So mixed use to me with some connectivity with, and that's in the 2017, I think it was used close to 40 times on mixed use, right? So something that what we've got, but how do we walk across the street and get to different places that people want to be at, right? So I don't know, that was a little tangent, but that's kind of where I'm at on providing something for Stowe residents that we wanted, that may not be a downtown, but it's something, right?
So just to kind of repeat back to you what I've heard, some of the concerns, there's a lack of connection between new subdivisions, especially like infill subdivisions where they're just sort of like one-offs. If there's going to be higher density, it seems like it'd be more appropriate near commercial areas where people are able to walk to more places, be better connected to development, something like the Plain Township Amphitheater, public gathering space where not only is it commercial and residential, but a third place beyond that as well. And then making sure that the code allows for uses that people really want to see, like restaurants. I know Zach mentioned it is pretty difficult in the code today to start a restaurant here in Stowe. So certainly as a part of this process, we can look into making that much easier for folks to do.
I think you're on it, and Zach will know this. We were talking about a restaurant in one of our council meetings, and they needed like 96 parking spaces, and I was going, what? Why do they need 96 parking spaces, right? Those kind of things that are outdated need updated. But I mean, then I didn't know this, Walmart, there's a certain width on parking spaces and blah, all those things that go with it. And we never move fast, government, and I wish we moved faster. But, I just think residents have been waiting for something like that for a while. And we need to move toward that direction. So yeah, you repeated it correctly.
Yeah, a lot of good thoughts in there. So yeah, allowing housing, and I think this really gets into some of the question up on the screen here is where in the community do you think more development or more housing could be allowed? But yeah, definitely looking into allowing it in commercial corridors. So in areas where we might have commercial plazas and some of the strip development, like looking at ways to repurpose some of that, allowing more restaurant and entertainment uses, it sounds like would be a good priority. And yeah, making sure that the code really allows for development that would provide a sort of cohesive space for people to gather, even if it doesn't fit a sort of downtown mold necessarily, would be a good priority. But yeah, are there any other thoughts on housing or appropriate location?
I'm just going to want to jump on the back of that last comment. I think as you go through this, and whether this is in your scope of work or not, it would be good for at least me to understand some examples of what you've done in other places. We saw a list of, I don't know, 30 or 40 cities that your company has reworked zoning at, and I would like to see how you go about doing that. I see that both as an advantage not only to government, because if they're the ones, or we're the ones that have to implement this ultimately, how does that happen? And how does the public become to accept that? And how do they work with it? So, again, examples of how this can work. Right now, I think our experience mostly, as you can tell, is looking at surrounding communities. I would add Kent to the list of cities that have successfully turned and created a vibrant downtown area from something that wasn't. In each of those, the Hudson, Cuyahoga Falls, and Kent all have kind of unique circumstances there. I'm sure there's a unique circumstance here. I'm hoping to challenge you. It's your job to find that unique circumstance and bring it to our attention and show us how that happens.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll be glad to provide a lot of examples as far as how other communities have approached this. We work quite a bit, as Jackie was mentioning, in the Midwest and throughout the United States, but we work in Wisconsin and Illinois and Michigan, and we'll be glad to provide a lot of examples on all those kinds of things. And too, I think we can look at where communities have had success in the region here, and where there might be more updated, where community might have more updated zoning that's working well. We can look to and provide some good examples. Yeah, some good case studies to look at. So.
As a part of our next step, when we do our preliminary recommendations report, we'll be doing comparative communities and best practices research. So comparative communities, we want to, be sure to benchmark Stow against its peers to make sure that the city remains competitive, but certainly want to look at best practices beyond those that are being employed here in the region, as that you all are really utilizing the best and brightest, most innovative approaches that we can. Making sure they're appropriate for Stow. So that's why we'll bring different best practice case studies. Then we can have that conversation about, okay, maybe we'll pull X from this community and Y from this other community and create something that's really Stow specific and something that will really work for you all moving forward.
So briefly, just on the back of the comments we just had, I think any housing type that will emphasize more compact development will be very beneficial to the community. So I know there are different housing types that will fit very much into that compact development that allows people or neighborhoods to be connected. Allows for multimodal transportation, allows for a less carbon-centric city. That allows for us to incorporate elements into the neighborhoods that reduce stormwater runoff, elements that reduce urban heat island effect. Those type of elements, within a more compact development superstructure, if I could put it that way. I think those will be very beneficial, and I think both comments that I've heard from my colleagues here, I think it resonates broadly with what the city would like to see. So more emphasis on that, I believe, will be helpful.
Yeah, that's great feedback to have. Yeah, I think we can look into ways to make development more compact and sort of less consuming of land and natural resources. Kind of keep that in mind as a goal to as we move forward through the process. There's a lot of different ways we can do that through the zoning, definitely all the regulations around off-street parking, landscaping, buffering between uses. A lot of zoning codes can encourage stormwater management features and those kinds of things to be provided. So yeah, I think there's a lot to take a look at there.
Great, thank you.
And I think this can kind of lead into some of our next topics here. We definitely had in mind to take a look at, wanted your input on design standards and sort of how development should look and feel, and maybe how it should appear in the community, whether that is new commercial development, how you think some of the commercial plazas should be redeveloped or reused over time. Everything from that to, say, multifamily development or things like a duplex or a triplex in a neighborhood. Which kinds of appearances you think that those developments should take, whether that's higher quality building materials, variety of building sizes, certain ways that building facades should look, how features like garages be should appear on building facades, whether there's opportunities to maybe locate parking to the rear buildings in certain areas of the community to make them more of a pedestrian-friendly environment. Really would, like your thoughts on any kind of issues related to design of buildings here. We have a few images we can show up on the screen here that might give you a sense of what we mean by design here. So the image right up there, this image one, this mixed-use development, certainly with, I think, a ground floor retail or commercial use and maybe residential or office up above, or a mix of the two. Some of those kind of brick materials used, plenty of window space on the first floor. The building entrance is very prominent on the corner there. This can be sort of a pedestrian oriented look and feel.
Any thoughts on that housing or this development type?
I mean, my first reaction is that front door is not, there might be a side door, but that's not accessible to somebody in a wheelchair. I'm seeing stairs, on-street parking. There's never usually enough handicap spots for people, so I just think there's a lot of issues sometimes with parking behind or rear, like over in Cuyahoga Falls, my first watch. There's a Starbucks drive-through, so you're trying to get to a restaurant with children and people with disabilities. There's not really a drop-off. So if we're looking at something like this, it would be more of a drop-off area or accessible for the downtown type of feel. So that's my reaction to that first of all.
Yeah, that's a good comment there. So keeping in mind how all of those regulations regarding site design impact accessibility and how different users and different abilities could be impacted by all those different regulations. Yeah, that's a good issue.
My initial thought on it, though, other than the factor, which is obviously very important, is though that it does have the mixed use, which you get more bang for your space, I feel like, because then you're going to have people living there. They're going to obviously use the businesses. It's going to bring more people in because their friends are going to come over, their family members are going to come over. So overall, instead of just having like we have like the strip mall, where Norton Road, or the one where Drug Mart is, that's it. You go to Drug Mart, you go home. You go, you know what I mean? But if you had that space, there would just be more bang for your area. And I think it would just help local businesses and bring more tenants in and just drive everything up.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my initial thought.
I think as the city matures and the density starts getting greater, that's when you'll start seeing a demand for this type of building product. I think to go back to your slide previous, I would advocate for less city requirements than more, and I would let the market drive what gets built. I don't want to get involved in a zoning code that talks about the quantity of windows. I would let, people that are going to live there are going to want to look out the windows, so the people that are building it, that are paying for it to hopefully attract the residents, will put windows in. I don't need to be doing that, and I feel. So I would see, yes, we want to set some guidelines. I think they need to be flexible guidelines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a good thought too. Is we'll look to you all definitely for the right appropriate degree of regulation, how much you think the city should sort of regulate design, and how much should be left up to the market. Definitely, whether there's certain areas of the community where you might like to have a little more of a standard for something in certain areas where there should be less. That's all.
If you could pretty much eliminate the Board of Zoning Appeals board if you just increase the allowable area for accessory buildings on a piece of property. There's a vast majority of, not say just a majority, but there's a vast number of older homes, second, third generation homes on smaller, what I would classify as a city lot as opposed to like a subdivision type of a development where you have bigger lots. And as those houses are being occupied longer or being, bought and purchased by next, second, or third generation people for those lots, they're looking for a larger garage, another storage shed. The houses can't get any bigger because it's not a very big house to begin with on that size of a lot, and so people are adding more space to put things, cars, stuff, whatever you want to call it. That's probably 95% of the Board of Zoning Appeals hearings. And the other one is fences.
And setbacks, right? Well, the setbacks cause the issues. They're all different, right? And every time BZA, which I was on for 4 years, it's a setback, a fence, a pool. I can't do it. Can I get a variance? Can I, build this accessory building? So yeah, you're right. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the things that we're looking at to updating the code. I mean, a good telltale when something needs updated is when variances keep getting approved because we know the code isn't working. So that's certainly one of the requirements for accessory buildings.
Yeah, I do wonder, is there a certain area, do you think like accessory buildings is a really, like that's one of the biggest areas that the BZA is hearing a lot of cases on as opposed to hearing and approving a lot of cases on as opposed to say building setbacks, or is it a mix of both?
I think it's residential across the board. I mean, we see less of it in what I would say houses that have been built from the 80s, 90s, and more recently, because they tended to be bigger houses. Sometimes you'll see somebody who wants to add it on to their garage and add another garage in that case, but mostly it's smaller houses that were probably built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and they're small and they're on small lots. Narrow, very deep. I just want to put a shed way back there. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's something we can take a look at, and we see a lot of in communities is right-sizing the dimensional standards in older neighborhoods that were developed, decades ago, or maybe even before the zoning regulations that are in place now were adopted, making sure that they kind of fit with what's desired there. I think that's a good thing we can look into.
Listening to all the comments here, and I wholeheartedly agree. Right around us, we have Kent, Hudson, and the Falls have drawing points or drawing features that bring people in. In your research, if you're going to go ahead and deal with other types of communities that are similar to Stow, it'd be interesting to see how many of them had that, some kind of draw. I mean, Kent's got Kent State, Falls has a river, and Hudson has shopping in the square. So it'd just be interesting, just as another element to your research, I guess, is to find out in any of those that have been successful, have they had a drawing point or center that has been crucial or critical in getting, the growth and the development up? Just out of curiosity, I guess, more than anything else. Maybe that can help us too.
Well, kind of picking that up, back off what you were saying, like, is there in our industrial areas, like, Fogg's got Route 8, we got by the turnpikes. So is there something we can put in our code to attract businesses into our industrial areas that, that's the future, or something, that we need to put some extra power in or water, or, like what they did in Columbus for the chip stuff. So I'm just saying, is there something in the industrial area we kind of look at and say, if we did this, we could set ourselves up for the next 30, 50 years, 100 years to kind of attract people.
Will mentioned some of those things do fall outside of the zoning code itself. So those are really kind of more economic development focused items. We can certainly take a look at how industrial buildings and development are regulated in other communities and see where Stow's regulations may be out of sync with those other communities that have had success in those economic development efforts. But certainly will not be looking into more of the kind of policy direction or other types of economic development incentives that the city could look into, but more so on how can we remove barriers, regulatory barriers to the type of development that we want to see.
From a guy that represented a developer for many years and had worked in the city of Stow, for you guys from the other side, from the guy that used to sit out there, Stow is not a difficult city to work with. It's actually very business friendly. They're very helpful. The staff is competent. I don't mean to make that sound meaning. That's positive. That's a compliment, Zach. And they are, generally it's a good experience. I think Stow's doesn't necessarily have a regulatory issue. It's just availability of land. As better sites, for example, in the industrial area in the city, as the bigger sites get developed and buildings get built there, then you start looking at some of the smaller pieces, or you've got to deal with a wetlands issue, and you have to go through a mitigation process that's lengthy and costly. So those areas exist, and those opportunities still do exist. I think more of this zoning code needs to address redevelopment into the direction that the city wants to go in the future, because we can't make more land unless we steal it from somebody next door, and I don't think that's legal.
I agree. Just there's areas that are too difficult for, if someone could simply redevelop it and make it a mixed use and without all the that has to go with it. Oh, you can't do that because the code says this, or you have to do that. I totally agree, because we've got plenty of areas, but cities and municipalities have evolved in what we're doing. I mean, and to me, the easiest part of that goes with things like charging stations, where people are putting up in Stow, what's on the roof, guys? Solar panels. I mean, what's in our code that regulates or talks about that? Or, I mean, we got to give people an easy way to do those types of things, which we don't. I mean, it's difficult where we haven't kept up. And I know Zach said that, but I'm saying it's got to address those things. And I totally agree with the redevelopment. We got to take these areas that are pretty good areas. Caddy Corner, the old Marty's bike shop. We grew up there. It was fun. We rode our bikes. We're not doing that anymore, but we got to do something with it. And all the big strip malls, Giant Eagle on one end, the Norton Road one, the Stow Kent one. I mean, of course you vote for Dick's because there's nothing there, right? But it'd be nice if a developer could come in and say, here's what I'm going to do. And then, now you got your high-end rest. That's why I use the plain local amphitheater. It's shopping, dining, and entertainment all in one spot, which, I mean, I think that's what people are doing.
Yeah, but I think if you expect that we're just going to be able to make some zoning code changes and somebody's going to show up here and redevelop and create something for us, I don't think it works that way. Using our three examples still, Hudson was they were fortunate in the middle of their downtown. They had an industrial property. They were able to purchase that, and the city actually made the purchase, and that's what started their downtown catalyst development. Large piece of property, one owner, that was great. City of Kent, worked for a long time to clean up what was just basically bars for the university down there. The city of Cuyahoga Falls, their first experiment down there where they blocked off the road failed. I mean, it was miserable. Who went down there? Nobody. And they opened it back up, but it was the government that set the direction and had to put skin in the game, so to speak, in order to do that. And I think in order for the city of Stow to be successful at that in the next 10, 20, 30, whatever years, it's going to take involvement by the government of, buying that building and buying that property
Right.
and picking these things up and starting to, collect that to create what the vision is. And that's not necessarily maybe as much changing the zoning code as it is the comprehensive plan, but we're a steering committee.
Right.
So if that's the direction this committee is going to steer, then we need to give them that input. And then ultimately, as I looked through that, as we went through that, there's a presentation that council, being obviously the governing body of the city, has to approve this, or the voters are approving it, or however that works. So we're going to have to be able to defend what direction this is going in. And they need to buy into it also. They being really everybody, or at least a majority.
Agreed.
You're here. Let's go.
That's why we'll hire an economic development coordinator and get a community reinvestment corporation committee going. So yes, with you.
Yeah, so a lot of good input there. I think a lot of as you mentioned there, I think a lot of the issues around redevelopment, there are things outside the zoning that come into play there through, financial incentives for redevelopment and the city getting involved in redevelopment as well. But definitely like zoning plays into it, and I think gearing the code towards redevelopment in situations and recognizing that the old code was probably from days where the city was much less developed already and much less built out, and gearing it towards sort of encouraging redevelopment. There's a lot of ways to do that through parking regulations, making the types of uses that are allowed more flexible, maybe addressing multiple uses on a site. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at gearing the code in that way.
Well, we'll be vocal in giving you our wish list, and then it's your job to come back with the tools within your scope that will help us get to our wish list as a city.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good plan. So I had a few other images as far as design goes to share with you all. Again, don't want to ignore some of our topics that we have later too, but this again, a mixed use development with a lot of window space, first floor awnings. Again, a more pedestrian type of look and feel. Here, a similar theme, but with different types of architectural treatment and materials used on facade. There's definitely some facade articulation in there that sort of gives an element of like visual interest on the front and side of the building there. Encouraging outdoor gathering space and allowing accessory uses like outdoor dining real clearly in new development, redevelopment can be a good way to sort of get at that sense of place and encouraging, I think like we were talking about earlier, just a gathering space and an environment that people might like to go to and spend some time in. So making sure the code allows for that kind of thing real clearly can be a good approach. And again, getting at the sense of place here with some outdoor outdoor gathering space, outdoor open areas, integrating that into development where possible. You can see on the screen towards the left-hand side of the image here, might get at the idea of encouraging or creating a sense of place, sort of mixed-use destination that people might like to go to. You can see buildings here in this image a little further set back from the public street there. And again, some more mixed use types of development here, definitely with residential above. This time integrating features like balconies on upper floors can be a way to activate the environment outdoors, making sure that those are real clearly allowed under the zoning regulations. And again here, this would be a solely residential development without a commercial component on this particular site here, definitely with balconies integrated, giving a sort of cohesive sense of place there. So I know that there's a lot to take in with some of those images, but yeah, are there any sort of reactions to any of those images that we had up on the screen there? Thoughts on things you like or don't like, or you know, whether, as you mentioned earlier, there's not so much a desire to regulate the appearance of development, maybe.
What are your thoughts on more design standards for commercial or even multifamily developments?
I don't want any design standards.
Would you prefer that more development get approved through a discretionary approval process where you have a conversation and negotiation through planning commission and city council, where you get to those types of design standards and requirements through that discussion? Or do you think it would be more straightforward to have standards in the code that we have to meet, and if you want to do something different, have a process by which you request flexibility?
Probably the second of those. Yeah, I mean, the city doesn't have an architectural review board.
Certainly. Yeah, so I think all of the standards we would promote would be objective standards that you wouldn't need to be an architect to be able to interpret and apply. It would really just be a minimum requirement, so that some of the conversations and discussions that we do have at the planning commission and city council level can kind of be taken off the table and established in the code, so there's fair certainty moving forward in terms of what Stow's standard is. And if you want to do something different, we'll certainly hear you out and we'll certainly consider that. It's just a different process.
Okay, yes, I think so.
Okay.
I don't think, speaking for myself, looking at the different images that you've put up on the screen here, obviously they represent a number of different architectural styles.
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to promote growth, bring people into the city and create positive economic benefit, I don't care what it looks like. Now, is it going to look ugly? But I might think so. He might not. I mean, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If it's achieving its objectives, then you know, that in itself is a worthy goal. And I don't think, you know, yes, we can keep architects in rein because they need it. I'm saying that because I am one, and I know what that means. So, but I think, you know, again, if something is way off the beaten path, it's probably not going to fly. So,
100%.
you know,
Yeah.
I don't think we're guiding, we're not directing.
Mm-hmm.
I get
To-
that, for
To
sure.
me, this, I would react like the design is fine, but if there was a single home next to this and you have balconies and people out there making noise to a single use, so I think it's about where this would be in the city. You know, I wouldn't want, you know, somebody that's lived there for 40 years to have this next to them with the cars and balconies. So I guess that's, to me, what that would, so it's more about where this would be. If it's, you know, over by, you know, Target across the street and this is a multi-use function and there's restaurants and there's balconies, that makes sense. But if there's a house that's been there for 50 years and we put this next to somebody that is going to hear all these people on a balcony, would be the issue.
And I think you're gonna have that. I mean, we're not gonna please everybody.
Oh, I understand.
Right.
But
There's gonna
if
be
this is
some
just
friction somewhere.
correct,
But you're
this
right.
dropped into a neighborhood.
The zoning code, you know, with buffers from one use or district or density or whichever to another, you know, that makes 100% sense.
Yeah, definitely good.
So from what I'm hearing, there should be a lot of emphasis on what gets us to be a functional, what gets us to our goals. So more emphasis on functionality over the appearance of things. I think if we place more emphasis on what gets us to our goal, what gets us to be a city where things thrive, there's that emphasis on that over how it appears. I think we'll be getting closer and closer to our goal here. So maybe to put it briefly, more emphasis on functionality over the appearance.
Yeah, good thoughts there. I think everything related to design, it's an interesting area, but I think not dictating so much design, but and ensuring that the code's flexible enough to allow really some creativity depending on the site and the circumstance is a good goal. But just ensuring that there's a baseline standard and recognizing, I think, like we mentioned earlier, it came up earlier, establishing more concrete and objective standards for different ways a site should look or how different amenities can be provided can be a good way that communities will streamline the process and make it easier to get development done. So things like making sure that there's objective standards for landscaping and how where and how much landscaping should be provided on a site to make sure that the city's first getting some baseline layer as far as how it should look and feel, but that it's objective and easy to interpret. Things like parking lots and signs, making sure that there's objective and easy to interpret standards for all of that in the zoning code can be a good way to like expedite development and make it easier to get through the approval process when there are concrete standards for those amenities. So are there any other thoughts on development improvements like the ones up on the screen here?
So I can start on that. So, I know earlier we had talked about having more compact development, right? And so talking about, future multifamily, mixed use, non-residential development, all of that. I think if we can get, improved multimodal transportation, and I see sidewalks, I see bicycle infrastructure, improved zoning enforcement and all of that. I think those will be key elements to having that compact development that we had talked about previously. And so more emphasis on multimodal transportation, connectivity of things, accessibility, getting from one place to the other, without all the the hassle that comes with having things spread out, in a more disjointed and disconnected way. So I think that type of emphasis will be good.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just talking with the commission I'm on. We've talked, there's obviously standards for handicap spots and standards for building standards that we all have to meet, but we've always talked that we want Stow to be better than the standards, that our standards want to be better than national standards for people with disabilities, and kind of maybe put that into our code. I know there's all those, but we want to just do a little bit better and have that kind of be like people know the place is to be in Stow is to have more accessibility. And I've said it, I'm repeating myself, but I know there's building standards that are, but we want to be that step above and just kind of have that as a showcase.
Yeah, so that's all really good input, and I think we can fold that into the development code going forward. There's a lot of different ways to like look at all that as far as accessibility goes and multimodal options. We wanted to ask about, we are getting towards the end of our time, so I think we'll we've heard a lot of good input so far, and we'll continue to get more from here, but we'll
You can send these questions out to you all to further consider it and then think about it. And if you have any thoughts, please send them along to Zach and he'll forward them along to us. Too much good discussion today. We're just talking too much and not have enough time.
I'm a graphic person, as I mentioned, being architect, but if I'd love to get a copy of this, just so I can use it as my own more outline moving forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. So yeah, a lot of good feedback this evening. I think we covered a lot of ground. So next steps, we have the community open house tomorrow evening in this room, and then the online questionnaire will be open for during the summer for a period of time, and then we'll be taking all of that together and creating a summary of all the input, and then we'll be back with you all to review a recommendations report for zoning code updates based on all of that input. So that's where we're headed next with the process here. And just as a last note, please help us spread the word about the open house tomorrow evening right back here. We'd love to get as many people as possible in attendance tomorrow. All right, so.
That's all we got. So again, thank you for volunteering. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming out tonight. We'll talk again in a couple months or so.